I'm Seth for Privacy, and thanks so much for joining us on the journey to sovereignty. We're beyond thrilled to have a place for us to chat about all things sovereignty, the why and how we're reclaiming your digital sovereignty, and to give you all a chance to chime in, ask questions, and join the conversation. Journey to Sovereignty is brought to you by Foundation, where we build Bitcoin-centric tools that empower you to reclaim your digital sovereignty. This includes our Passport hardware wallet and Envoy mobile app. So for today, I really wanted to cover the Oslo Freedom Forum that we got to attend last week. One of the things that drew me to Foundation was this team's wholehearted love for human freedom. And it's something that has been near and dear to me for many years now, but something that I've come to really appreciate the power of Bitcoin when it comes to human freedom. So I was really excited that we got to participate as a team at the Oslo Freedom Forum this year, as it really aligns well with the core ethos of our team. We actually sponsored this year by giving away 15 passports to attendees who had a clear need for a better way to store and use their Bitcoin as they fight for freedom. And it was really, really cool to see in a boots on the ground sense how Bitcoin is helping these people out. So I'm really excited to share their stories with you all throughout the year. And we'll do that starting with today's episode. So as always, I'm joined by Bitcoin Q&A, Head of Customer Experience here at Foundation. And this week, I'm also excited to be joined by Jack, another teammate. How's it going, guys?
Yeah, doing well, Seth. Good to be back on. I am just recovering from some sunburn from Norway. Believe it or not, I didn't actually know that Norway could get hot enough to get sunburn, which was a pleasant surprise. But yeah, I had a fantastic week, and yeah, looking forward to covering the details.
Yeah, hey Seth, thanks for having me. First timer over here. So yeah, really excited. I guess Q&A, 1 a.m. sunburn, right? That's the type of sun they have over in Oslo. It's weird, but they seem to make it work. So all right, thanks, Seth.
Yeah, I was very surprised to hear how hot and sunny Oslo was. I think I just always assumed it was going to be freezing cold no matter what time of year it was, even though I know that's not a very not a very well-informed view. So definitely surprised there. And sadly, I didn't get to attend this year. So a lot of this chat is going to be me living vicariously through the two of you and really learning from y'all about what your big takeaways were for Oslo Freedom Forum. So thankfully, y'all got to go. You got to connect with journalists, dissidents, and a host of people who are seeking freedom across the globe last week. But for those of us who haven't been able to get out to the Oslo Freedom Forum yet, what was the overall event actually like? I know it's very different from your normal conference.
Yeah, definitely. This is the main focus of the conference or of the forum is absolutely not Bitcoin. There are small portions of it that do have Bitcoin, which we're going to cover off later on. But the main focus was freedom. The event attracts activists, dissidents, people who have been exiled from their own countries by having opposing opinions to the powers in those countries. And it's about showcasing those people's stories and how, the impact that they're having in pushing back against the various different types of abuse, torture, or oppression in wherever that is that they come from. So the event was split up into sort of AM and PM sessions. The AM sessions were run in a main, rather large auditorium where we got to hear some of the real heartfelt stories from some of these dissidents and activists around the world. Many of them were very hard to hear. But I was personally almost brought to tears a couple of times by hearing some of the horrendous amounts of torture and abuse that some of these activists had to go through simply for just having a dissenting opinion and speaking out against the status quo wherever they come from. So as much as it was kind of an enjoyable event, it was, some of those stories were really hard to hear, and to kind of, it was a big wake-up call as somebody who comes from a somewhat privileged Westerner viewpoint. In the afternoon, we had some breakout sessions in much smaller rooms that were covering more specific topics, all loosely tied around sort of freedom, but they all broke out into things like Bitcoin, of course, artificial intelligence, digital security, even down to things like mental health, and then location-specific stuff around kind of oppression in China or Hong Kong, and things like that all over the world. And then finally on Thursday was held at a separate location, which was an absolutely beautiful location on the waterfront overlooking the Opera House. And this was my personal favorite day because there was what's called the Financial Freedom track that had hours and hours of talks focused on, again, the same sort of activists and dissidents, but how they were using Bitcoin as a tool to push back against the financial oppression that they or their organizations had been faced with. So it was quite a wide-ranging thing. And for somebody like myself, who's only ever really been to a Bitcoin conference, it was quite a big step change, but it was absolutely a worthwhile experience. And I'm really, really looking forward to go back next year if we can make it.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing when I think about Oslo Freedom Forum is that many of us, especially if we kind of like got into the conference scene because of Bitcoin, we've only really been exposed to kind of the Bitcoin-centric conferences. I mean, I've been to other technical conferences outside of the Bitcoin space, but they're really usually focused on the technology and the how, and usually not on the why as much, even though that's always a bit of it. But I think that was a really interesting part in what you were just breaking down, and that like the main focus was around freedom as a general topic and not necessarily Bitcoin. But how would the two of you compare the Freedom Forum with other more kind of standard Bitcoin conferences? Not to denigrate other conferences or anything like that. We love so many conferences in the space, but just to kind of talk about some of the differences there.
Yeah, so I think Q&A already touched like the main points, but at the Oslo Freedom Forum, Bitcoin was a side event. It was not the main focus, right? And this made it slightly different in several ways. So again, like Q&A said, there was like this one big stage where all the main talks were held, and there was like what almost felt like meeting rooms where all the other minor talks were. There wasn't like any booths, or there wasn't anything for sale there. There wasn't any like company, any major company, major Bitcoin company making announcements or like trying to sell you like their next big product, the next big thing, right? It was more of a conference about gathering everyone that had something to say in regards to freedom, people that had to fight for freedoms that you almost take for granted, right? So in regards to Bitcoin specifically, and how the Bitcoin aspect of it was different from the from other mainstream Bitcoin events, I'd say that since it was a side gig, no one really stopped by and asked us like, things like how many coins do you support? That's, which is broken at so many levels, right? That question is just broken at so many levels. But we didn't get that question like anywhere. Like we didn't even get close to getting that question, right? No one was there for the number go up technology. Everyone that was there understood Bitcoin as a means to obtain their sought after financial freedom, right? No one was there asking like, how's the Bitcoin price doing? Is it going up? Is it going down? We're in a bull run. We're in a bear cycle. Like no one really cared about how many sats per byte were in the next block. There was there was no wizards jumping on stage like cheering for monkey JPEGs. It's a different type of conference. We're not there. So these things are just the nuances that in Oslo people didn't really care about. Like, don't get me wrong, they're important. We have to like talk about them and discuss them in Bitcoin conferences, but this conference was just as a, hey, how can I use Bitcoin to pay my unbanked workers? How can I pay lawyers for political dissidents without my, government blocking me? Or how can I actually use Bitcoin as a tool, right? So the fact that Bitcoin was like a side thing in the otherwise like freedom-oriented forum, I think that got rid of all the noise that we're used to in like other mainstream Bitcoin conferences, and it made it focus more on the essentials, right? And that was just, it was different and it was beautiful, honestly. Like a Q&A, I don't know if you have something to add here, but it was great. It felt different in that regard.
Yeah, no, completely echo those thoughts. I think the only other realization that I had there was, whilst there were many people who have realized the benefits of Bitcoin, especially in their specific situations around, routing around the state to be able to move money and to be able to receive donations. And again, we're going to cover some of those examples shortly. I did have a bit of a wake-up call that there was still a significant portion of the crowd that either weren't interested in Bitcoin, or that potentially just needed more education on to understand the benefits of it. So whilst it was fantastic to see, like Jack said, that there were lots of people that are already leveraging Bitcoin, I still think there's a lot of work to do to kind of spread this to even more people that can benefit from it. And I guess that's why there are events like the Oslo Freedom Forum and many more similar to it, to try and continue raising those that awareness. So I think, yeah, definitely a positive thing, but definitely still some more work to do. And the guys at HRF are doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, it's one of the crazy things I think is when you break past the Bitcoin as the why, and I think you start to think of Bitcoin as the how to achieving human freedom, it really changes the perspective, and it feels like that was kind of the one of the core aspects of also Freedom Forum, and that Bitcoin is one of the key tools, like very, very, very important because financial sovereignty and financial freedom is key to enabling broader human freedom. But that an immensely powerful tool, but one that we still have to educate people on. We still have to get the word out on how Bitcoin is not just a stock, not just a number go up investment, but can actually be this immensely powerful tool for human freedom that we've never had in the history of civilization before, which is a crazy, crazy thought. And I'm glad that the Freedom Forum is really highlighting that. So, kind of adding on to that and getting into some of the specific details of the things that stood out to y'all at the conference, but what were some of the ways that you saw Bitcoin concretely aiding human freedom in the stories and presentations at the conference? And then were there any that have really stuck with you since heading home after the conference last week?
Yeah, I think one of my standouts was a lady called Anna Chekovich. She is an activist and the financial director of the Anti-Corruption Foundation, which is the organization that was originally founded, I believe, by Alexei Navalny, which is probably a name that most people have heard of. He was the main opposition leader to Mr. Putin over in Russia. Alexei Navalny was poisoned with a Soviet-made nerve agent back in 2020 when he was on a trip to Siberia, and then he was also later imprisoned for, I think it was 12 years on what her organization are reportedly calling false accusations of fraud and contempt of court. So it basically sounds like a bit of a hatchet job to kind of get rid of the competition there, which probably isn't surprising. Together with other members of her foundation, Anna has also been persecuted by the Russian regime and was forced to leave the country back in 2019 under pressure of another criminal case. So she's been working on major opposition projects, and the Anti-Corruption Foundation has been using Bitcoin in order to avoid government surveillance since as early as 2016. So Bitcoin has helped her foundation maintain opposition activities within Russia, whilst their local bank accounts were under constant attack from the regime in Russia again. And I think they've also had to move and relocate the base of that foundation to Lithuania again through after them being labelled as an extremist organisation within Russia. And when she was giving one of her talks, she actually brought up a screenshot of the one of the organisations that she's a part of, their bank account. And she said that she logged in one day after having a lot of, I think it was after that they'd been labelled an extremist organisation within Russia. She logged into the company's bank account, sorry, the organisation's bank account, and it had minus 1.4 billion rubles in there. Now, I'm not clever enough to be able to quickly convert that into dollars, but I'd imagine it's still quite a lot in dollar terms. So it just really paints a picture that, you know, if you are part of the opposition in a regime where there is sort of a large central power that isn't afraid to kind of wield their power with, you know, through the banking system, Bitcoin is literally offering a lifeline to her and to the people in their organization so they can continue to push back and, you know, fight against corruption within Russia.
Yeah, that was a pretty powerful speech. There was like a whole panel on dictators, how dictators go to the first thing they do is just shut down your financial system, right? Because they have access to it. So the legacy financial system can be shut down. So that was a pretty powerful one. I can think of another one that's somewhat different in a way. So Roya Mahbub, I think that's I'm pretty sure I mispronounced that, but she's a CEO. She's from Afghanistan. I think she has multiple companies, and she was telling how like about 85% of people in Afghanistan are unbanked, and that, well, it's a pretty high number, but disproportionately affects women. So she has these companies where she hires mostly women. She's the co-founder of the Afghan Girls Robotics Team, CEO of the Digital Citizen Fund. So she's got a multiple gigs going on. And so she had this problem where she was hiring like programmers and coders and whatnot, and she had these tech companies growing like crazy. but she was completely unable to pay their employees because they were unbanked, right? They didn't have a bank account. So how do you pay your employees without a bank account? Well, she found ways around that. Apparently, there's something called Hawala or something like that, where there's like a system where you could like send cash to someone. I'm not too familiar with that system, but apparently it's like some sort of sending physical money, right? So they were having this problem where the husbands of these female employees were intercepting these envelopes with cash or whatnot, and so they were eventually like essentially controlling the finances of her female employees, right? Same happened for those lucky ones that did have a bank account. The bank account didn't belong to them; belonged to their husbands, or their if they're not married, to their closest relative, male, right? So they would intercept all the payments for their employees. So she was thinking about this until I think she talked to Alex Gladstein. She's been using Bitcoin since 2013 to like route around this, what she calls a physical barrier. And so she's been able to like pay her employees with Bitcoin. And so things like that, like getting your employees a salary, right? Things like you don't even think of that as a freedom, but it's possible to not be able to do that, right? So this was like the type of things that blew my mind. And she also talked about how she told stories about how when the Taliban got to power in 2021, how after that all the banking system just collapsed and most of them just worked with cash, but Bitcoin was still working, right? And that's the environment where Bitcoin thrives. But apparently, she also told stories about how the Taliban learned about that, and they started like, since they weren't able to control that, because that's literally like what Bitcoin is. It's uncontrollable, it's uncontrollable, like no one can get a hand of it, right? So they essentially just made Bitcoin illegal. And she mentioned how like, not regardless, like young people are still like using it to make payments under the table and stuff. But yeah, so something as basic as just getting your employees paid, like not being able to pay for your employees. And in this case, not because there was like a totalitarian government, which in the end it happened to be that way, but just because there's like this cultural thing where your employees don't get paid because their male relatives control their finances, right? So empowering women and freeing them this way, it was impressive to see. So Q&A, if you're okay with this, I think I'm gonna go with another example. I think another one that really stood out to me, because there was like these crazy stories, like it's hard, all right? I'm gonna say it's hard to like pick a bunch of them. I grabbed Royas because it was different, but the next one I'm gonna go with is Farida Naborema, which I'm pretty sure I vastly I mispronounced that as well. She's a Togolese human rights defender living in exile right now in Ghana, if I'm not mistaken. She told this crazy story how her and people working for her, like NGOs and stuff, they had to, like, they were working in Togo, right? But they had their accounts, their legacy finance system, like frozen. They couldn't like just get any money out of ATMs or anything. So they had to walk all the way, drive to the frontier with Ghana, just cross the border, go to Ghana, then open a bank account in Ghana and get paid through your bank account in your neighboring country. Then walk there whenever you needed money, take money out of an ATM, and then walk all the way back to Togo with a bag full of cash. Like, it's that bad when the government goes after your financial, your banking system or whatever, right? She told us how in the end, it turns out that the Togolese government soon got access to like the Ghanan banking system, and they even like froze those accounts too. So there was no way around that. It's like, all right, we're done. There's nothing we can do. We can no longer cross the border with like bags of cash, right? We can no longer do that. So they found Bitcoin, and they've been routing payments with Bitcoin successfully, right? Evading these Togolese blockade since I don't remember the year, but like since a couple of years ago, I think, with when again Alex Gladstein reached out to them. She also happens to be the founder of the Africa Bitcoin Conference that happens in Ghana, I think every year. I think this year runs December 1st through 3rd, so big kudos to her for that. Yeah, big personalities here. So it was super exciting to hear these stories firsthand, and they're just, it's not the typical stories you hear when you attend to a Bitcoin Bitcoin conference, right?
Yeah, definitely. There seems to be a bit of a theme emerging here. Government decides they don't like you. People turn to Bitcoin as an alternative when they're left with no other option. So, yeah, the final example I've got is from a guy who I was fortunate enough to share a couple of beers with one night actually as well. Goes by the name KG. He's actually the founder of a company called Mashankura, which a few people listening to this might have actually heard of because it's somewhat talked about in the sort of Bitcoin Twitter sphere. Mashinkora is a system where people are able to send text messages to one another to pay in Bitcoin, and it's gained a fair bit of traction in Africa, where smartphones aren't exactly easy to come by for a lot of the population. And this service allows people that don't have an ID, don't have a bank account, and that can't afford a phone, and maybe not have any internet data because it's either too expensive or the local network is just not good enough. This service, Mashinkora, is allowing people to access Bitcoin to be able to participate in their local economy. The service at the moment is a custodial one, just due to the way that it works. But people do have access to be able to, interface with the Bitcoin network without having to need all of the overheads that people in the Western countries take for advantage, like fast internet and expensive phones and things like that. So if anybody wants to check that one out, it's the website is 833.mobi. And when I was fortunate enough to share a couple of beers with him, he did have some quite interesting plans actually to turn this into a non-custodial service as well, which as I'm sure everybody listening to this will understand the value of as well. So definitely one that we are going to be watching, and shout out to KG for doing awesome work for Bitcoiners in Africa. I know he's pretty much the head of the team there, and it has put all of this work in himself as well. So to be able to allow people to interact with the Bitcoin system that would otherwise be completely just priced out of it because of their personal situation. So lots of examples there, Seth, and I'm sure Jack and I could probably go on for hours and hours based on all the stories that we heard. But yeah, those are some highlights for us.
Yeah, it's hard to really wrap my mind around all of the things. I mean, those are just, like you said, a handful of stories of people who are seeing like real life change because of this, like enabling real businesses that could not exist otherwise, enabling people fighting against human rights abuses that could not exist, could not happen without Bitcoin. And like I feel like those of us in relatively safe, peaceful Western countries, it's really hard to grasp how important Bitcoin can be to others across the globe, and how important Bitcoin could be for us if things take a turn for the worst. And I think like when I hear and walk through these stories, it's so helpful to give me perspective on what Bitcoin is, what it can be, what it can do in a real world sense. Because it's easy to get lost, especially like I'm more on the technical side. I love the actual technology behind how Bitcoin works, getting into the weeds on privacy technology and all these things. But I feel like it's very easy for me to lose perspective and lose this vision for what we can enable through Bitcoin and how it can really lead to human flourishing in a way that isn't possible without it. It's amazing to think about that, but I'm sure both of y'all come from similar Western backgrounds. I'd love to hear if the Freedom Forum helped to kind of change that struggle to grasp how important Bitcoin is for others across the globe.
Yeah, I think you summarized my kind of the wake up call that I had beautifully there, Seth. It's very easy to kind of pay lip service to we have a common saying, "Oh, Bitcoin fixes this," and it gets thrown around far too often for me. And that kind of you spend all day on Bitcoin Twitter talking to other Bitcoiners who are passionate, and 99% of them are from the Western world that live a somewhat privileged life, and somewhat treat Bitcoin as kind of a quasi stock that they just use to save in. Not saying there's anything wrong with that at all, but it's easy to, when you're not living under an oppressive regime and you don't have to worry about your bank account being shut down tomorrow or how you're going to pay your staff next month and make payroll and things like that, to fall into that trap of just seeing Bitcoin as like a savings technology that has some cool technology behind it. So hearing stories like the example that the two of us have just given, and how people are literally using Bitcoin today to ease their situation and to help their cause, whether that is banking people that don't have a bank account, or that is receiving donations because you are pushing against corruption in Russia. Hearing those stories come from a human mouth, and the trials and tribulations and the way that Bitcoin has fixed or at least helped their situation was a drastic wake up call for me and also a kind of lit a fire under my ass again to further cement that we're onto a good thing here, and that we are doing the right thing. We've probably got a longer way to go, but yeah, absolutely a huge wake up call, and just thankful to have been a part of it. Really, it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I think I could not agree more with you, Q&A. It was eye-opening is the word. Yeah, it's like I feel like everyone that, well, all of our listeners I'm taking, but everyone that works in Bitcoin and in the industry already like has an understanding of how powerful this technology is, or like how powerful it can be in like freeing the financials of people, right? But actually getting to see it firsthand, that was like a very, very special experience. Like almost, I don't know, say like weird example, but say you're a rocket scientist and you're working on like propellers technology to like make rockets go faster or get longer or whatever, but like you've never really seen a spaceship actually take off, right? You've seen videos of other rockets, you've studied technology behind it, you know how it works, you know it should work because you work in that, but you've never actually seen one. And this conference was like, in this example, getting to Cape Canaveral and just seeing a massive, like a 500-foot tall spaceship just take off in front of you. Like it's the feeling of being there and interacting with these people. Like, of course, you know it was going to work. Like, what's shocking is like actually being there and seeing it like with your own eyes, right? That's what's I guess eye-opening or jaw-dropping, right? Seeing that it works the way it was intended. So, I think answering the question, I don't think the conference changed the way I see Bitcoin or the way it's gonna go. But if anything, as Q&A said, it reinforced the importance of the work we're doing here, right? Because sometimes it's easy to get lost in the detail, in the, hey, this button should be darker blue or like clearer blue, or like we're spending too much time on this, or like this feature is not this, like you're zoomed in into like the daily workload. But this conference was like a zoomed out, like a major view of like what we're doing, where we're headed, and like, hey, we're making these people lives easier, and like we're making Bitcoin achievable and like easier to access for like more people like them. So it was like a big, I think you used the term wake up call. I totally aligned with that. It was like an eye opening experience being able to like live that in firsthand, right, and get to know all these people. It was just amazing.
Yeah, do you know what's just cropped into my head? Remember that sort of wow moment you have when you do your first on-chain transaction, or the wow moment you have when you make your first Lightning transaction, and you're like, holy shit, like it works, it's doing something. I had the same sort of realization where, on a much grander scale, let's be fair, where people are telling us these stories and they're like, yeah, Bitcoin did this for me, and yeah, it was very similar to that, just on a much larger scale, and really, really heartwarming. Yeah. So just wanted to throw that analogy out there just to kind of make it hit home for the people listening that, this was a really powerful thing.
Yeah, I love that, and it's one of the reasons why I was so happy to join Foundation and so excited, was because people like y'all are the people I work with every day. Who we're not just here to make money. We're not just here to build some big tech company. Like, that's not the vision. The vision is enabling human freedom. And so it's awesome to hear, and like hear from y'all how you met these people in real life. You shook hands. You had a beer with one of the guys whose story you were telling. It's crazy to have that and use that as inspiration. It's something that I'm excited that we can continue to focus on as a company, and I think that we can feed off those stories, and something where I'm really excited to tell more of those stories in a unique way over the next few months as well. But specifically, when we talk about us in a Bitcoin company, like our focus is building tools that help to enable freedom, building tools that help you to reclaim sovereignty. I'm sure that there were some Bitcoin specific thoughts or maybe feedback from speakers that jumped out to you and made you say, like, we need to do this as a company, or like, I want to fix this solo. What were some of the things that really jumped out at you from the conference in that way?
I think the main standout for me was that a hardware wallet and the basic concept of a hardware wallet is a step too far for most newcomers, especially if they're in emerging markets or oppressive regimes where, generally speaking, people have less frequent access to the internet and to information. There's just the mere concept of like this physical device that stores a digital asset seems is as a foreign concept. I guess the other one would be obviously pricing is a huge barrier to mass adoption as well. So most people have very little amounts of disposable income. So the idea of spending like $150 on a physical device to store some Bitcoin that you may or may not even be able to afford is just out of the question. So I think as a company, we've already kind of started to address that with Envoy, our mobile app. Obviously, anybody now with a smartphone can leverage. They can install it in 4 taps and have a mobile wallet right on their smartphone. So we've already started to make steps to make sure that people can benefit from the hive mind that we've got at Foundation, and the focus on security and UX that we're continually building on. So I think we've already started to fix that a little bit. And I guess with the pricing, I would absolutely love to do a cheaper hardware wallet maybe in the future. That's absolutely not a spoiler. We have no immediate plans for, but it's something that I'd love for us to explore in the future so that we can reach more of the world market that has less disposable income, but perhaps sees the benefit in having a dedicated device to segregate their Bitcoin storage from their day-to-day carry.
Yeah, I love that concept of a cheaper device. I'm curious what we can explore there. But I do also I think there is also this clear use case for things like Passport and multi-sig setups and that kind of thing for these broader organizations. Like some of your examples were people who are running NGOs or companies. So there's definitely like a need for that type of tool at some level. But like you said, people on the ground, the average person who's fighting for human rights in Africa is not going to spend $200 on a Passport, which is totally fine. And that's not like that's not something that needs to happen. That's not the goal. And that's where I think Envoy plays a good role, and future things that we're building will be helpful. That's where I'm so thankful that we can have open source tools that are freely available and freely usable to anyone who has a smartphone. It's a huge deal, and a big reason why we will always have Envoy being a totally free app.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I don't know, Q&A, if you noticed this when we were there, but so some of the people we talked to had already used Bitcoin, like all the examples we used. They were people that had already used Bitcoin before, but there were a lot of other dissidents that we stopped by, had a chat with, and they had heard about Bitcoin, but they were not sure about it. So they didn't really know what was going on. So we showed them around, we download Envoy, whatever. And I think the user experience here is critical. And I'm gonna do like a spoiler, well, not a spoiler, but on Envoy, for example, you won't see the word SegWit, right? We use SegWit addresses all the time, but like SegWit is a word that a non-technical user, that it's just a blocker, right? Someone that just wants to receive Bitcoin to like pay a ransom or like do whatever they want. They don't have to know all these technical terms, right? So I'm gonna go with user experience being like another big barrier in like currently existing like wallets, and like everyone takes for granted that people know what Taproot is, for example, or we just talked about multi-sig. Like someone that's new to the space, they're like, what are you talking about? What is that, right? So I think this is something that we have very present at Foundation, and we're like trying to make Bitcoin accessible to everyone, like understandable to people that don't necessarily know about Bitcoin. And I think that's great. In this regard, I'd say I'm going to say that one of the things that I will love to see coming forward will be multi language, for example, or like having devices in like different languages, so we can expand to other markets, right? And then I guess another one that I would love to do would be just education and like training people and like teaching them what the Bitcoin basics are and how it works. Because essentially, the more you like say you don't know anything about Bitcoin, you download Envoy, you know how to use it as a tool, and that's great. But the more you understand something, the more you really want to learn about it, and the more you care about using it, right? So I don't want to just throw Envoy down people's throats to be able to use Bitcoin. I want them to like once you know how to use Envoy, like that's great. Like now take one more step, like learn how Bitcoin works, like why there's like, I don't know, confirmations needed, or so going down that road. Because we found a lot of people that were like, yeah, what is Bitcoin? Like, I'm like, where do I start, right? So I think that was eye-opening too.
Yeah, I think that's an exciting aspect of it, and a daunting one as an educator and someone who loves to try and break things down in understandable ways. Is that there's still so much work to do there. There's still such a need for so many more people to jump in and help out. There's such a gap where anybody really on Twitter who has understanding of how these tools work, anybody with connections, anybody in communities that are in need of using Bitcoin can really step up and fill that gap and educate. It's definitely something that I'm excited for us to do more of moving forward, and just for the passion within the team for education, for making things as simple as possible, but also helping people to understand the whys and the hows behind these things. So definitely excited for that. But lastly, I just really wanted to dive into if there's any one thing that you'd like to impress on listeners as a takeaway for those of us who couldn't be there in person.
Yeah, I would say Bitcoin right now is not perfect by any means. It probably never will be perfect. It's made some clear trade-offs to gain the properties that it does, and that makes it weaker in other areas. But when used correctly in the right circumstances, like the ones that we've spoken about today, it already is fulfilling its goals of censorship-resistant peer-to-peer cash, and hearing that live and how it's doing that in the real world, none of this theory of fancy books and 25-page articles and things like that. Hearing it actually helping people day to day was absolutely awesome. With that said, I think as a community, I think we've still got a lot of work to do to lower the barriers to entry. So, we've spoken about UX within applications, we've spoken about cheaper devices, we've spoken about education, and all of that, combined, will mean that more people can understand and leverage this technology as a tool for financial freedom worldwide. So I think, as a collective, we've still got a lot of work to do. And finally, I guess scaling solutions are going to be important. As the global hive mind increases and more people want to onboard to Bitcoin, scaling solutions are going to be super important. So I'm kind of excited to see what the future holds in this regard. There's lots of things. Things like Lightning, things like Arc, coming around the corner, that are in various states of development. Clearly, some are more packed out than others, but I'm excited to see what the future holds. And I think the main takeaway for me is that when we do explore these new solutions, that we absolutely shouldn't compromise on self-custody. That is absolutely paramount and should be the line in the sand for me personally, at least, anyway.
So for me, if I had one takeaway to explain here, bring from Oslo, I'd say shortly that we are on the right side of history. No oppressive regime has ever lasted forever, right? And building tools for freedom has never been on the wrong side of history. Say, I'm gonna go with a couple of examples here that I can think of, but the invention of writing, for example, right? Giving people the ability to send thoughts and ideas in the future across generations, and allowing people to build on top of what others did before them, or taking this one step farther, right? The printing press, for example, this allowed information to flow widely and cheaply, right? It was a revolution of its own. Or the next one, the industrial revolution, the invention of, say, the steam engine, right? Anyone could now hop on a train and just travel crazy distances previously unimaginable. No new places. I don't know. They were no longer stuck in the town where they had been born, and they were not stuck there, right? Like it happened with everyone else for them in the entire history, right? So the latest one would be, for example, the internet, right? Allowing sharing information, photos, videos, ideas, you name it, instantly anywhere, with anyone in the world. I don't think all these examples that I could I just mentioned here. I don't think anyone looks back and no one ever says well, you know what? In hindsight, maybe we should have never invented the printing press. Writing was a mistake. the steam engine, we should have never done that, right? The internet was just wrong, that we should ban the internet. Like no one really says that, right? And that's because all of these things are tools for freedom, right? Tools that have pushed humanity forward in a way, or have set humans free in one way or another, right? And what all these tools have in common is that oppressive regimes have always tried to manipulate, control, block them ever since they exist. So after attending this conference, I think the little doubt that I had in that Bitcoin is like the next big revolution in freedom technology just vanished. Being able to like transact with whoever you want without anyone having to approve that, like any transaction in like near instant time, that's really big. So I think like with all other tools, like with all like all freedom tools before it Bitcoin will spark a revolution. So my takeaway for our listeners today is to keep learning, keep educating, keep building, essentially keep fighting, because what this conference like reassured me was that we absolutely are on the right side of history, with Bitcoin being the latest of the tools for freedom.
I love it. I love those comparisons, especially printing press and internet. I think are such good examples of things that were fought by a lot of people and they tried to use them to censor and suppress and control, but the things that ultimately have led to human freedom. And it's awesome that we are, I think, early in Bitcoin as a tool for human freedom, even though Bitcoin's been around for 10 years. And I hate the we're still early kind of meme with Bitcoin, but
yeah,
I do think that we are early in this sense of actually using Bitcoin as a powerful tool. I mean, one of your stories was she started using it back in 2013, which I feel like has got to be one of the earliest cases of really like a real life, real world business funding human freedom use case of Bitcoin. But a lot of these cases have really started in the last few years. So it's an exciting place to be, and it's, I think, an encouraging and also an inspiring place to be, and in that we have so much more work to do. We have so much more that we need to accomplish to bring down the barrier of entry, like y'all mentioned, to bring it into something that really everyone who sees the need for freedom can take and use Bitcoin for that purpose. But it's definitely an exciting thing to cover. Thank you both so much for walking through the conference and walking through your thoughts and experiences. Any last thoughts before we close out here, guys?
Nothing from me. I just thoroughly enjoyed it, and I can see Arsh is in the audience, so I just want to give him a shout out, because he was one of the small team that was organising the Bitcoin side of things, and he did a fantastic job. So just want to say hi to him, and looking forward to heading back out to Oslo next year.
Yeah, same here. I had an absolute blast. Learned a lot. It was an eye opener. Good point out, Q&A. Thank you, Arsh, for everything you did. Alex, Lee, I don't know if you were there. But thanks for you too. You guys made it great. So yeah, really looking forward to like being there next year as well. Thanks for having us, Seth.
Yeah, absolutely. And hell or high water, I will be there next year. So I'm excited to finally join. I'll make it happen one way or another. Hopefully bring the family along. But thank you so much to the HRF, to Alex Gladstein, Alex Lee, to Arsh, to everybody who has poured so much time into helping to onboard people who are fighting for freedom to Bitcoin and put on the Oslo Freedom Forum. So huge shout out to them. They're the reason that we're able to talk about this stuff and hear these stories and walk through some of these powerful examples. So thankful for them. Thank you everybody for jumping in today, and look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks for jumping in for this episode of Journey to Sovereignty, and I hope you'll join us for our next live Twitter space every other Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. GMT. Joining us live gives you a chance to listen in, participate, and get your questions answered on the spot. Follow us at Foundation DVCS on Twitter to keep up with the latest news, get notifications when we go live, and much more. See you at the next one, and thanks for joining us on the Journey to Sovereignty.